Hello there, Lunar Squadron, and welcome back to the channel. We are now officially less than 2 months away from the release date of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and over the past month, we've spent a lot of time talking about Star Wars Outlaws and GTA 6 and Ghosts of Yotei and a bunch of other stuff. However, over this past month, a ton of new gameplay and story details have surfaced for the new Indiana Jones game, and today we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about them, we're going to break them down, we're going to analyze them, because a lot of this stuff has gone under the radar, and this is a game that we have been covering on this channel for years now, so you guys know that we are very excited about it. But before we get into this conversation, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you as always, and the way to do that, just go down below this video, hit that little subscribe button, the bell notification right on next to it. It will notify you every single time that Andreas and I upload. And if you'd like to take this conversation beyond the comment section on YouTube, make sure to head over to Twitter and follow us at Lunar Squadron, or jump into our Discord server. All of the information for that will be down below. Now that all out of the way, Andreas, are you finally ready to talk about Indiana Jones again?
Oh yeah, let's do this, guys. A lot of developments have occurred about this new Indiana Jones game since we last talked about it. The game now has a early December release date. It is coming to the PlayStation. Recently, it was nominated in the Golden Joystick Awards for being a most wanted title for 2025. There's been so much about this game, and this really is a pretty large moment that Indiana Jones fans have been waiting for so long. Frankly, we've never really gotten a AAA Indiana Jones game, and here we are on the doorstep of our first AAA Indiana Jones title that's getting the proper AAA treatment of marketing. It's getting its own console here with the Indiana Jones Edition Xbox, which not everybody's going to get their hands on. Frankly, almost nobody's going to get their hands on this thing, but it seems to be getting that AAA treatment, and here we are, and yet I have this feeling in the pit of my stomach of, does anyone truly care about this game?
Yeah, I think that is the question that a lot of us Indiana Jones fans feel about the franchise as a whole, is, does anybody really care about this franchise anymore? It was definitely felt with the release of Dial of Destiny. Obviously, that film just did not do well at the box office, and it really does feel like going into the Great Circle that this might be the last shot that this franchise has to be relevant or to really even exist at all, especially just after the monetary loss of Dial of Destiny and the fact that Harrison Ford will no longer be playing the character. Will Disney and Lucasfilm honestly invest in this franchise going forward if this video game flops? This really does feel like our last shot at success with the franchise, and I really hope this game pops off, because I think there is a lot of potential down the road for this franchise if they chose to explore it. But what I want to talk about today is this article out of The Guardian from a few weeks ago. This has some of the most recent information, and in the second paragraph of this article, they talk about the staying power of the Indiana Jones franchise and how influential it has been, because it is one of the most influential IP of all time. It influenced an entire industry in archaeology. It has had a huge influence over film, and as they mentioned in the article, it's had a huge influence over video games. Tomb Raider and Uncharted, two of the biggest action adventure franchises out there, were directly influenced by Indiana Jones. They simply would not exist without Indiana Jones. But despite that, despite all of this influence, outside of games that were made up of Lego, this game has really never gotten a huge AAA title, and the last time you really think they attempted it, or you could say they attempted it, was Staff of Kings all the way back in 2009, and that whole thing was just an outright disaster from development and release, and just what happened with that game was just an outright disaster. We've never really gotten this treatment with the franchise, so its potential is incredibly exciting, because we could be getting this, 30 plus hour long film of Indiana Jones and gameplay, and there's so much exciting stuff there. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to be excited because, like you said, Andres, it just feels like, does anybody really care anymore outside of the few of us who really do truly love this franchise? It's just, we're in a really weird place with this franchise right now.
Yeah, and in that landscape here, up steps Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And for a lot of us, this game has such a large potential because, like you said, Nick, throughout the years, if we wanted to scratch our itch when it comes to living an Indiana Jones adventure in the gameplay medium, what I personally have been doing recently, I've been in an Indiana Jones mood, and I've had to pop in Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. I've played through that game recently in the last couple of weeks, and I've had a great time, but the whole time I'm wishing, hey, how cool would this be if this were an Indiana Jones game? I think that feeling represents how I've felt with video games over the past couple of decades now, where if I want to live out a Star Wars experience, there's so many Star Wars games I can choose from. I have been living out my Star Wars Fantasy and Star Wars Battlefront for many, many years in a variety of single-player options that we've gotten for Star Wars over the years. But when it comes to Indiana Jones, I have to go to lateral IPs in the Uncharted series, in Tomb Raider. And those are really my options because we've never really gotten a solid Indiana Jones option. And that is where the next question comes up. And that is, will this game be that authentic Indiana Jones experience, that solid Indiana Jones actual IP tie-in that has that AAA feel of an Uncharted game? Or will this game really fall on its face here? I am rooting for the former and not the latter, as I'm sure you are too, Nick.
Yeah, definitely. And they actually dive into that in this article. This article does a great job of just pulling quotes from members of the team over at Machine Games. And I want to focus in on this quote here where they say, working on this game, it's been a childhood dream. And that comes from the design director. It's just one of those properties that you think you will never get the opportunity to work on. And then the next quote follows up with, making sure that this feels like Indiana Jones has really been the biggest thing with this project. And this comes from the creative director on the game, who continues with, Raiders to us is the most iconic representation of Indiana Jones, the first that the world came to love. So it felt very natural to keep that as our main reference. And then following that quote, Andres, there's this whole paragraph where they talk about the fact that they've been in weekly meetings with Lucasfilm, that they've seen unseen material. They're always talking with Lucasfilm about how to keep this game true to the franchise, true to the nature of Indiana Jones. And that really is something that excites me now. Of course, we've seen it with games in the past, games that we have covered on this channel. Just because the team is passionate about the franchise or wants to stick to the roots of said franchise doesn't mean the game is going to be perfect, doesn't mean it's going to be a 10 out of 10, but I do appreciate that they are making such a huge effort to stay true to the nature of the original 3 Indiana Jones films, because that is just what we all know and love, and it just makes me think of other franchises that we've seen and other IP that we've seen where creatives come into a project within that franchise and they've decided, I'm not going to play the source material, or I'm not going to watch the source material, or I'm not going to read the source material. I think of like the Halo show, for example. And then it just doesn't feel true to the nature of the franchise. I don't think that is something right now that the Indiana Jones franchise can afford. So I think that this is a great way that Machine Games is approaching this, and I hope it works out in the end.
Yeah, there are things that all of us love about Raiders, about Temple of Doom, about Last Crusade, and it feels like so much of Lucasfilm's trajectory with this IP has been trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle that they were able to have with those first 3 films, and they have fallen short for a lot of people. I mean, just looking at the box office performance of the Dial of Destiny is a great measuring stick on how the current population views Indiana Jones as having lost its luster, lost its lightning. And here, looking at what this studio is really marketing this game as being an opportunity for Lucasfilm to recapture that magic in a new medium, I think is what I've been wanting out of an Indiana Jones game, is to harken back to those originals. And if you didn't recognize this article so far, it might be because it actually had a different headline when the article originally came out back in September 17th. And I've seen this article quoted all over the place with this quote here. I'm looking at a tweet from Culture Crave where it says, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg have been consistently involved in the development of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And when you go look at the Guardian article today, that reference to the consistent involvement of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg in the development of this game has actually been removed from this article entirely. And at the bottom, it says also a quote that said Machine Games has been in regular contact with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg has been removed. as it was based on a misunderstanding, and a reference to this in the subheading has been removed accordingly. I personally feel like this is one of the crazier misquotes I've seen in an article like this, where the one quote that people were tossing around about this article is actually not true. And for me, when I saw that quote that George Lucas and Spielberg were involved in this project, that was so relieving to me, because for me, I felt like it was such a welcome return to have Steven Spielberg and George Lucas back in this IP, nurturing the IP that they started from the ground up. And at a minimum, this was kind of a comfort blanket for a lot of fans who are worried that we might be straying away from those original films. And here it looks like that news is actually not true. And I'm wondering if that's going to actually impact the vibes of this game, or if they are in fact sticking true to the original medium of Raiders and Last Crusade and Temple of Doom.
It's just not something I'm really concerned about, because it says that they removed the whole part where they had regular contact. That doesn't mean that they haven't contacted them at all. That doesn't mean that Lucasfilm hasn't reached out to Spielberg and Lucas in the past to ask them for help or advice on this project. It just means that they haven't had regular contact. Whatever that means, I don't think it's something worth freaking out about just yet. But what I do want to focus in on are some of the gameplay details that we learned throughout this article, because it feels like where we are going to see the labor of that love of trying to stay true to the nature of Indiana Jones and who Indiana Jones is as a character and is as a franchise is within that core gameplay loop. There's this quote here where they say that we want to create the feeling of not just playing Indiana Jones, but being Indiana Jones. And I think that is what we're going to experience in this game. Like, that is what Machine Games is going for. And of course, there is this follow-up paragraph where it says, the Great Circle's main quest will, of course, be a linear cinematic tale, but there are also open areas that players can explore at their own leisure. As Indy wandered around a bustling Middle Eastern bazaar, a whole host of people and distractions were beckoning. Looking for side quests and taking the time to explore will earn adventure points that allow players to unlock new abilities of their choice. Some of these optional moments hark back to the old LucasArts adventure games in that they're designed to test your puzzle-solving skills. Quote, maybe you encounter a mystery around the corner. You are encouraged to solve that, and you get rewards for it, says Anderson. And these optional puzzles and missions may be even harder. And then they continue with, unlike in Machine Games' over-the-top Wolfenstein games, in which you gleefully riddled Nazis with lead, here Indy must blend in to get by, dressing up in Nazi uniforms or playing a thief. Quote, we have this escalation-based idea on how you tackle scenarios. If stealth fails, that's where hand-to-hand combat comes in, or you can use the whip to disarm people. If all goes to hell and guns start firing, you can pull out your revolver, but that's really, really high risk. Andreas, I'm really excited to hear this, because one thing that I've been really concerned about with this game, especially once it was confirmed that it was first person from Machine Games and with their whole history of the Wolfenstein franchise, I was afraid that this was just going to become a you use your revolver and you run and gun, and that's just not who Indiana Jones is. So to get this confirmation that we are dealing with a escalation-based sort of combat or gameplay, it's really interesting. Like, I think there's a lot of really exciting potential here for the core gameplay loop, where you have that more linear narrative structure, but then it kind of opens up in certain areas where you can run around and explore. And I'm very interested to see what those side quests are going to be, and like solving the puzzles, but then also keeping it fun with the hand-to-hand combat and the whip. Like, you still want the game to be fun. You don't want it to just be all puzzle-based. So there's just a lot of moving parts here, and a lot they have to balance to keep things engaging for the players, but also stay true to who the character is. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this game plays. I think it's going to be one of the more interesting gameplay experiences from the past few years.
Yeah, Machine Games, they have their work cut out for them here. I mean, they have to please the original Indiana Jones fans, and then they also have to expand the IP in a way that doesn't feel like it's just treading old ground. And then on top of that, they have to make a fun game. It's not enough for them just to be passionate about Indiana Jones and for this to feel authentically Indiana Jones. We saw a lot of people commenting about the trailer that was more of a cinematic trailer and pointing out that Machine Games forgot to put a game in there. I remember that being one of the headlines. And so a lot of people are going to be looking at this game as, hey, this can't just be authentic and it can't just be Indiana Jones. It also has to be fun. And then also here we're looking at a game that is going to lean heavily on the stealth aspect. And when we look at the most previous entry of the Lucasfilm games line of games in the stealth category with Star Wars Outlaws, that game caught a lot of flack for having poor stealth, poor AI when it came to the stealth in that game. And with how big stealth was in Star Wars Outlaws, that became a point of a lot of criticism for that game. This game has to have excellent stealth if that is actually the way that they're taking this game. And then on top of that, they also have to have those interesting puzzles and a interesting balance of puzzles with the actual gameplay. And that's something, when I was going back and playing Uncharted Lost Legacy recently, I really commend that game for having a great balance of action and puzzle and story. And this game really does have a challenge there of having to strike that balance. So I am hoping that Machine Games hits it out of the park on all fronts here, but they certainly do have their work cut out for them here.
Yeah, they really do, because it's not just gameplay, right, when it comes to Indiana Jones. And they talk about in this article about how this is a typically globe-trotting story, with Indy starting out in Connecticut before sneaking through the Vatican and Shanghai and then the Himalayas and then across Thailand's Sukhothai temples. Like, the story in Indiana Jones is really important. So you have to have really fun and engaging gameplay and also a really fun and engaging story. Like, there is a lot more challenge here, I think, than people realize when it comes to crafting an Indiana Jones video game. And for me, I know we've talked about this in the past, Andreas, so I'm like, I hope that if like one thing is better than the other, for me, it's probably the story, because worst case scenario, we just get like an additional 30-hour or so long Indiana Jones movie. Like, that would be my worst case scenario. So I'm hoping that like a lot of the focus went into telling a really engaging story, but at the same time, I really hope that the gameplay is fun. There's a lot of challenges here involved with creating this game, and I agree with you. I really hope Machine Games has put something together that is really special, because this franchise desperately needs that right now. It needs something special. It needs a hit right now if it is going to be around much longer. So anyway, guys, let us know your thoughts down below on Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Is this a game that you are excited for? Are you looking forward to it? How are you feeling about the direction of the story that it seems to be going in? How do you feel about the gameplay? I know a lot of people don't really like the whole first-person thing. I know if we had our preference, this game, of course, would have been third-person, like, say, an Uncharted or Tomb Raider, but it is first-person. I understand what they're going for. They want you to feel like you are Indiana Jones. So just let us know all of your thoughts on this game, how you're feeling about 2 months out from release. But, guys, that is going to do it for us for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all next time.